Shortly before I started watching season 2, I decided to play a little game. I decided to do a little something for fun. I manually wrote down every single swear word, every instance of a swear word being said in all 8 episodes of season 2. Every time they say the F word, every time they say the B word, every time they say the SH word, that sort of thing. Why? I don't know. I felt like I wanted to prove a point that has already been proven God knows how many times. Maybe it was just for fun. Maybe it's because I thought this was the only thing that would make season 2 tolerable. I don't know. I just did it. I manually wrote down every single time there is a swear word said on the show on season 2. Now, please note, when I wrote all of this down, I decided to include tame swear words as well. I decided, you know what, stuff like damn and crap, they count. I don't care. Admittedly, something that I forgot to take into consideration was every single time they said hell. But then I would have to distinguish every time the characters say hell to refer to where they live, the location that they live in, versus every time they say hell as a swear word. Every time they say, what the hell? What the hell is this? What the hell is going on? I didn't even register hell as technically being a swear word until I was like halfway into season 2. And then as soon as I realized that, I was like, nah, I don't feel like going back and including every instance that the characters say hell. I'm sorry. And as you can see from the results, yeah, this show has a potty mouth still. The excessive swearing is back in season 2, and it's still not funny. There are in total 306 swear words that are said across season 2, with over 170 of those swear words being the F word alone. The final episode of season 2, Curtain Call, is significantly longer than the other episodes of season 2, and the other episodes of the show in general, including season 1, being almost 40 minutes long, being 37 minutes long. And they say the F word over 50 times in the episode, which is just absolutely insane to me. I've got to be honest, I'm gonna go into detail about this later on, but there are moments in the final episode that I found to be surprisingly kind of good, actually. There are action scenes in the final episode that I kind of enjoyed. I thought they were actually pretty decent. I was actually kind of invested in what was going on, believe it or not. I never in my life thought I would ever say this stuff about Hazbin Hotel, but here we are. There are fight scenes in the final episode that I think they're pretty cool scenes. I think they're actually pretty good. But the thing that drags them down, the thing that ruins them, is the unnecessary swearing. The pointlessly shoehorned in F-bombs completely ruin these cool action scenes. Again, it comes off like a very cheap, lazy way to convey that this isn't some baby cartoon. This isn't some kid-friendly Disney cartoon. This isn't Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. No, this is a cartoon for big boys. This is a cartoon for big, strong, manly men. No babies allowed. And it's like the action scenes alone are enough to convey that this is for adults and not for kids. The unnecessary swearing completely ruin what are otherwise surprisingly really good action scenes, especially for Hazbin Hotel standards. While I was watching season 2, I just kept looking at all of the excessive swearing. Every time a character says the F word or the B word or whatever, it just made me think of something. And I'm addressing this to anyone that likes Hazbin Hotel or Helluva Boss. I am asking this to anyone that is a fan of the Helluverse. A genuine, honest, sincere question. At what point does this stop being funny for y'all? At what point will you look at this and realize, no, this isn't really funny anymore? Hazbin Hotel is expected to get at least 4 seasons, and I wouldn't be surprised if it gets greenlit for more seasons after that. At what point will the swearing stop being funny? Because it's like, me personally, I don't think it's funny at all. It wasn't funny in the 2019 pilot, it wasn't funny in season 1, and it wasn't funny in season 2, and I guarantee you it won't be funny in season 3 or season 4. I'm willing to forgive the unfunny humor for the 2019 pilot because it is an amateur indie short that's uploaded onto YouTube. It's free to watch on YouTube. And then meanwhile, the final cartoon is much higher quality. It has a bigger, more professional team behind it. It is significantly more professionally made. It's on a major streaming service that you have to pay for. You can't just watch this for free like the 2019 pilot, unless you go the epic-based route that I always take, yar har fiddle dee dee, if you know what I mean. The final show premiered almost 5 years, almost half a decade after the 2019 pilot came out, and somehow, despite all of that, it has the same style of humor. The style of humor is exactly the same as it was in the pilot. It might have been excusable for the 2019 pilot, but it sure as hell is not excusable for the final show. Now again, I personally never found it to be funny at all from the very beginning, but let's say hypothetically, I found the excessive swearing funny in both the 2019 pilot and season 1. Imagine when this show ends after I don't know, 5 to 6 seasons, who knows how long this thing will last for. If I keep watching the show more and more, if I try and binge watch this show, eventually, very quickly, the excessive swearing will stop being funny. The whole thing of, haha, the characters say the F word a million times, maybe that might be funny in season 1, but by season 7, it'll be really fucking old and repetitive, and you'll just be begging for Vivian Medrano to come up with actual jokes for her cartoons, instead of just having it be like, the characters say the B word, that's it, that's the joke. I'm being serious with all of this. If there's anyone watching this that loves Hazbin Hotel or Helluva Boss, I need to know, at what point will the excessive swearing stop being funny to y'all? At what point will you look at all of the F-bombs being dropped in Hazbin Hotel and think, yeah, it's getting really old actually. This stopped being funny a long time ago. It was funny in season 1, but now we're in season 5, it's no longer funny. It's getting really old and stale. And that's one of the many reasons why I believe neither of these shows will have any kind of lasting impact. Neither of these shows will have any kind of legacy. You know how people say oh, Avatar is the highest grossing movie of all time, but it's left behind no cultural impact. Yeah, I could see both of these shows going through the same thing. They're massively popular shows right now, but I guarantee you, in 3 to 4 years, people will look back on these shows and find them to be unfunny and badly aged. These shows will go from being very polarizing, divisive, love it or hate it cartoons, to being unanimously agreed to be garbage. Again, if there's anyone watching this that's a fan of Hazbin Hotel, think about it. Do you see yourselves still loving this show 10 years from now? Do you see yourselves still finding this show funny or entertaining 10 years from now? Because I cannot imagine that at all. This thing is going to age badly. It already has aged badly for a lot of people. To the people that hate these two shows, they are dead on arrival. And so now it's only a matter of time before the fans of these two shows realize, actually no, these shows are not funny whatsoever. All I'm gonna say is the excessive swearing and sex jokes might be funny for y'all for the first season and maybe for the second season, but by the time we get to I don't know, season 8, they're gonna stop being funny. They're gonna become very stale, very repetitive, and very annoying. I guarantee it. It is inevitable. Oh yeah, speaking of the excessive sex jokes, I will give season 2 this. There aren't that many pointless, haha, it's funny because the characters are horny for each other jokes, like in season 1, or in both seasons of Helluva Boss. The haha horny, haha pee jokes that these shows have, they're surprisingly kept at a minimum for season 2, which I will give credit for. It's still there in season 2, and it's still not funny whatsoever, but at least it's not there that much. At least it's like they keep it at a minimum. And so even though it's still unfunny, I feel like it comes closer. The sex jokes, the horny PP jokes, whatever, they come a little bit closer to being actually funny when they're kept at a minimum, when they only do it on rare occasions. And there is something that I want to go over regarding one specific episode of season 2, that being the second episode, Storyteller, an episode that I personally believe to be maybe the best episode of Hazbin Hotel by far, not just for season 2, but also for the show in general. This is an episode that focuses entirely on Sir Pentious and heaven. We never once see hell at all in the episode. We never see Charlie or the 3Vs or Alistair, Angel Dust. We see none of them in this episode. We see Lute, we see Emily, we see Abel, we see this character who I don't remember her name, the character who is not God, obviously, but is also the closest thing the show has to God so far. So I'm just gonna refer to her as God to make things easier, even though she's clearly not God. And then, of course, we have Sir Pentious, who tries to adjust to life in heaven. It's in this episode where we get something that I had previously criticized this show for, something that I wish they did in season 1, and I don't know why they didn't do it. They go over the backstory for some of these characters. They go over what some of these characters were like before they died and went to hell. They go over why these characters died. In this episode, they do this for Sir Pentious. They go over his backstory, and then in 2 later episodes, or maybe they're in the same episode, I don't remember, they go over Alistair's backstory, and then they go over Vox's backstory. Thank you for that. Thank you. When I reviewed Helluva Boss Season 2, I acknowledged this as being something that they should have done for Season 1. They should have went over the backstory for these characters in Season 1. Not all of the characters. They could have gone through like only some of the characters and that's it. But instead, they don't go over the characters' backstories at all for season 1. I mainly brought this up in regards to Angel Dust, who is a very explicitly LGBT character, and he's in hell, he's not in heaven, and the show never once gives any backstory as to why he's in hell and not heaven, which could lead to some very unfortunate implications that are made even more unfortunate by the fact that there are no LGBT characters in heaven. None of the main characters from heaven, none of the heaven main characters are LGBT. Maybe Sir Pentious is LGBT, I don't know. I don't think there's a single straight character on this show. Not that it matters, the show would still be garbage if every character was straight, don't get the wrong idea. But it's like, you know, surely it can't be that hard to create an original transgender angel or anything like that. It can't be that hard to do it. If you can create a transgender demon, then you should have no problem creating a transgender angel. I'm just saying. But yes, indeed, they go over the backstories for some of these characters, explaining how they ended up in hell. They don't go over the backstory for Angel Dust in season 2, unfortunately. Well, they kind of do, but not really. You'll see what I mean later on. Instead, the only characters whose backstories are explored in season 2 are Sir Pentious, Alistair, and Vox. And I've got to be honest, their backstories aren't terrible necessarily. I think the show does a fairly good job, a fairly okay job at exploring their backstories. The whole thing with Sir Pentious is that he was an inventor back in like, I think it was like the 1800s or something like that, I don't know. And the sin that he committed, the reason why he ended up in hell hell and not heaven is because he saw this woman get murdered by Jack the Ripper and he didn't help out at all. He wanted to save this woman, but he didn't want to risk dying in the process. And so throughout the rest of his life, he felt this like guilt and regret over not being able to save the victims of Jack the Ripper. And then Alistair's whole thing is that he was from much later on in like the 1920s, 1930s, whatever. And he was like this radio host or something like that. I don't know, which, you know, that explains the kind of radio aesthetic that he has. That explains like the filter on his voice. And so he makes a deal with this demon. He sells his soul, I'm not sure, to become strong and powerful whenever he goes to the afterlife, whenever he like dies and goes to hell. I have no clue. And then Vox's whole thing is he used to be a TV reporter. He used to be like a news reporter, whatever. And more than anything else, he wanted the attention. He wanted people to focus on him to the point where he would murder other news reporters and like talk show hosts and whatever, just so that all of the spotlight could be on him. And again, the show does a fairly okay job at exploring these characters' backstories. However, there is one thing that I do have to question. Alistair's backstory reveals that he was a radio host when he was alive back in the 1920s or 30s or whatever, which explains the kind of old-timey feel that he has as a character. It explains the radio filter that his voice has. It explains the microphone stand cane that he has. It explains all of that. Vox's backstory reveals that he craved attention from people watching TV. He was a news reporter, a talk show host, that sort of thing, which explains why when he died and went to hell, he has a TV head. In addition to that, his cause of death was a TV fell on his head, which further explains why he has a TV head in hell. It also explains why in hell he, alongside Velvet and Valentino, run this massive media corporation that's also named after him, Vox Tech. So I have to ask, how come Serpentius is a snake in hell and I guess heaven as well, even though there is nothing in his backstory relating to snakes whatsoever? His whole thing was like, when he was alive, he was an inventor, and that's it. Has nothing to do with snakes at all. And so you would think like, oh, he died from something relating to snakes. He died from like a snake bite or something. Venom poisoning, whatever. No, that's not the case at all. I don't remember how he died, but it had nothing to do with snakes at all. I think they give an explanation as to why he has this snake appearance when he died. It's supposed to be like a pun on his name, Serpentius, as in serpent. I don't know. It's kind of fucking stupid if you ask me. You know, it's not really consistent. Alistair's backstory explains the old-timey radio appearance, and Vox's backstory explains the TV head appearance. So how come Serpentius's backstory doesn't explain the snake appearance? It doesn't really make much sense. It's not consistent. This is far from the biggest problem that I have with Hazbin Hotel's writing, but it is still something that I thought was worth bringing up anyways. But getting back on topic, episode 2 takes place entirely in heaven, and so as a result of that, there is very little swearing to be found in this episode, which, I've gotta be honest, I don't like the excessive swearing. This is not me defending it in any way. The excessive swearing will never not be unfunny. The excessive swearing will always be a cheap, lazy way to convey that the show is for adults and not for kids. But I will acknowledge it is a little bit clever. The idea that, like, in hell, the demons swear a lot. In heaven, the angels almost never swear at all. I think that is an idea that can work. The problem is, though, we don't really see heaven in this show all that much when compared to hell. And so this juxtaposition isn't really felt as much as it should be. If I binge watched all all of Hazbin Hotel and I got to this specific episode, I wouldn't look at the lack of swearing as being a funny contrast, but instead a breath of fresh air, a fluke if you will, before we go back to hell in the next episode, literally, and we have to deal with the incredibly unfunny excessive swearing, made even worse by the fact that the F word in the third episode is said a whopping 31 times, which is absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. The whole thing of like, oh, they don't swear in heaven because that's impolite and rude and whatever, it would be out of character, that sort of thing. It also made me realize why Adam as a character doesn't really work, besides the obvious fact that he's unfunny. Adam is supposed to be like, you know, one of the big leaders of heaven and whatever for the first season, and yet in terms of personality, in terms of like the way that he acts, he is no different from the demons. He is the only heaven main character in the show to act the same way as the demons, to excessively swear and whatever, make constant sex jokes, say the F word and the B word nonstop, that sort of thing. And it's like, it doesn't make sense at all, because this is Adam, as in Adam and Eve. This is the Adam. Maybe this was done deliberately as a joke. Maybe this was done to convey that like, oh, Adam thinks he's better than the demons in hell, but in actuality, he's no better or different from them. Maybe that's what they were going for, I'm not sure, but if that's the case, I feel like there is a much better way to convey that Adam is no better or different from the demons in hell that he hates. There's a much better way to convey that, I'm sure. None of the other heaven main characters swear or make sex jokes a million times like Adam did in season 1, so I'm just really confused as to what's up with that. Not even Abel, who was supposed to be Adam's son, is like that. I think there's like one instance across all of his appearances where he swears, and that's it. Compared to the other episodes, there aren't that many swear words in episode 2. A large majority of the swearing in this episode comes from Loot, and I guess to a lesser extent, this like hallucination of Adam that she has near the end of the episode. And in the context of what's going on, it makes sense for her to be swearing. The episode starts off with the angels holding a trial against Sir Pentious, wondering how it's possible for him to end up in heaven, what he was like when he was alive, and how he ended up in hell in the first place. It's there where the angels agree that redemption is indeed possible and that they should stop doing the exterminations, and so they welcome Sir Pentious into heaven. They welcome him in as being a worthy addition to heaven, and everyone's happy about it except for Loot, who is angry at the fact that the demons murdered Adam, and she insists that the exterminations continue and that Sir Pentious should go back to hell in order to avenge Adam. She's the only one that's against Sir Pentious joining heaven. She's the only one that's against the idea of redemption. She's the only one here that is angry and frustrated, and so it actually makes sense for her to be swearing. It makes sense for her to lose her cool and to start swearing, even though the angels in heaven very rarely swear, even though the other angels in heaven very rarely if ever swear. It makes sense. It's still not very funny, but at least it makes sense. And to be honest, it doesn't even feel like it's trying to be funny on certain occasions, which honestly makes it further work a little bit more. The fact that some of these swear words aren't being said for comedic purposes. There's not that much swearing in this episode because it takes place entirely in heaven and not hell. A majority of the swearing in this episode comes from one character, and in the context of the episode, it makes sense for her to be swearing. Sir Pentious' backstory is admittedly kind of interesting, and Lute's song near the end of the episode is actually kind of decent. Yeah, it's safe for me to say this is the best episode of Hazbin Hotel thus far, and it's still not a particularly great episode. But, you know, it is amazing when compared to the other episodes. There are redeeming qualities in this episode that help make it better than the other episodes. This is the Ozymandias of Hazbin Hotel. That being said, though, even if there isn't that much swearing in the episode, and even if this is the best episode of the show, it's still not a very funny episode. There's no excessive swearing in this episode, but I still didn't find it to be all that funny. I think the biggest problem with season 2 is that it is boring. Very, very boring. The offensively bad quality of season 1 isn't really there in season 2. I feel like maybe it's because I've gotten used to it. Maybe I've become desensitized by it. When I first watched season 1 of Hazbin Hotel back in 2024, and I saw how painfully unfunny it was, I was like, holy crap, this is the worst thing I have ever seen. How can anyone possibly like this show? And then over 1 year later, I'm watching season 2, and it's like, you know, it's still unfunny, but I feel like now I've just kind of gotten used to it. I'm just kind of bored more than anything else watching it. There are interesting ideas and concepts, but ultimately, I find it to be boring. As I've mentioned before, there are ideas and concepts and whatever that are introduced in season 2, and then they're just not really utilized all that much in season 2. The whole thing of Lute wanting to avenge Adam and get revenge on the demons and whatever. The whole thing of Abel being Adam's son and, you know, filling in his shoes. The third episode of the season focuses on the 3 Vs. Well, okay, 2 of the Vs, Velvet and Vox, visiting the Hazbin Hotel in order for Charlie to prove that redemption is indeed possible. And so she tries her absolute hardest to redeem Angel Dust, using him as an example, and none of her attempts to redeem Angel end up working. And then there's like this scene where Vox is interrogating Angel, claiming that like he can never be redeemed no matter what, and he briefly brings up that like he murdered his father or something like that, and it's like, you think that's gonna be an important, relevant thing for season 2. You would think that would be explored later on in this season, and then it is promptly never acknowledged again for the rest of the season. This is genuinely some of the worst foreshadowing I think I've ever seen in anything ever. I don't even know if you can classify this as foreshadowing, to be honest, because it is that bad. And yet, despite everything, despite how badly written season 2 is, despite the many problems with its writing, despite the very bloated, cluttered nature of season 2 that I've more or less become accustomed to with the Helluverse, I've just accepted the Helluverse is bloated and cluttered, and there's nothing I can do about it. There are way too many things that the Helluverse wants to tell me, and it doesn't give me enough time to digest all of it. Despite how frequently season 2 establishes certain things early on into it that are promptly ignored and never further explored for the rest of the season, and will very likely actually be further explored in season 3, in which case, why bother establishing this stuff early on into season 2? Despite the fact that the show never once explains this very huge, very noticeable plot hole of why Serpentius can't go through these angel portals with the other angels into hell. Despite everything that I've gone over with season 2, I don't hate it as much as the first season of Hazbin Hotel, or especially the second season of Helluva Boss. Again, I think there is still a noticeable improvement in terms of the quality, believe it or not, there are rare moments where I was actually kind of invested in what was going on. I was actually kind of invested in the story that season 2 was trying to tell. I watched season 2 of Helluva Boss, and it's like everything that happens in it, I'm like, I don't care about it. Why should I care about this stuff, honestly? But then with this, I'm able to care a little bit, a tiny bit. I'm able to care. I'm able to take some of the serious moments a little bit seriously. Thinking about it more, I think it would be better if Hazbin Hotel was primarily a drama with little to no comedy, while Helluva Boss was a comedy with little to no drama. I think the problem is, like, both of these shows try to be comedy dramas, and they fail miserably at it. I think Hazbin Hotel would work better if it was a lot more serious and drama-oriented, and then Helluva Boss is the comedic, raunchy spin-off, instead of having both shows try and fail to be comedy dramas. Of course, that would require Vivian Medrano to acknowledge the original premise that she established for Helluva Boss for her own show, and for whatever reason, this great premise, she's just like, nah, I'm ignoring it. Boring as hell bird-demon relationship. That's what should be prioritized instead. I guess I've just become numb to it all. Maybe I've gotten used to the badness of this show. When I first watched Hazbin Hotel back in early 2024, I was like, holy crap, this is so painfully unfunny. How could anyone possibly find this funny? And then here I am, over 1 year later, I'm watching this and it's like, the excessive swearing is still painfully unfunny, but I've also just like, I've kind of gotten used to it. I've become desensitized to it. As I've mentioned before, the second episode of season 2 is probably the best episode of the entire show, in part because there's not as much swearing in it. It's not just pointless F words and sex jokes and whatever being shoehorned in. That being said though, I still didn't find it to be a very funny episode. I found it to be kind of boring. It's the best episode. There are moments where I actually thought it was decent, but generally I was pretty bored watching it. There's just something missing from this show when it comes to its comedy. I guess it was the knowledge that like, okay, there's not as much swearing in this episode because this episode takes place entirely in heaven, and then the remaining 6 episodes we're gonna go back into hell, and so we're gonna go back to the excessive swearing and sex jokes, and so it's like, I wasn't able to enjoy the brief moment where there wasn't excessive swearing and sex jokes in the show because I knew that like it was temporary. It was for this one episode and that's it. Only this one episode. As soon as I started watching episode 3, I would immediately go back to being bombarded with F-bombs and sex jokes non-stop. And not once would it ever be funny. Okay, I have to admit something. There is one funny moment in season 2. There is one moment where I just died of laughter. This is the first and most likely only time I have ever laughed or ever will laugh watching Hazbin Hotel. And the craziest thing is, it's not even intended to be a joke. It's not even intended to be a funny scene or anything like that. If anything, it's funny because of how unfortunate it is. Just hear me out on this, please. Hear me out. Let me explain. Now, as I mentioned before, in the 3rd episode of Season 2, Vox and Velvet both visit the Hazbin Hotel. Charlie tries to convince them that redemption is possible, and she claims that, like, Angel Dust is close to being redeemed, and so she tries her absolute hardest to get Angel Dust redeemed, and then it doesn't work out at all. And then Vox goes on about how Angel Dust will never be redeemed no matter what. Angel Dust murdered his father when he was alive before he went to hell. I don't know. Again, this is something that's just randomly brought up one time and then never further explored for the rest of the season. This is obviously something that will be further explored in season 3, but it just makes me question why the even established this in season 2, early on into season 2 at that. That's not how foreshadowing works, Vivian. I'm sorry. And I think like Valentino gets brought up, and we know the whole thing with like Angel Dust and Valentino. That's not the funny part, I swear to y'all. And then Angel Dust runs off crying, and then Charlie tries to confront the two Vs, and then Velvet says something along the lines of, well, maybe if Angel Dust didn't get his panties in a twist. Except she doesn't say panties, she doesn't say underwear, she doesn't say anything like that. She says a completely different word. Now, there is another word for panties. I'm so sorry for using Google AI, but it's the only thing that I have. I'm so sorry for using it, but there's another word for panties. There's another word for underwear, and for very obvious reasons, I'm not going to say this word myself. I'm not going to take that risk, okay? And for whatever reason, they decide, yeah, let's just have Velvet say this word instead of having her say get his panties in a twist, you know, something that everyone says, normal people say. Let's be fancy and bold and have her say this word instead, not knowing, not realizing, completely ignoring the fact that it sounds like a certain other much more unfortunate word. Bro, it is a miracle, the fact that I knew this word was another word used to describe panties and underwear and whatever. It is a miracle that I knew that beforehand, because if I watched this episode, if I got to this scene and I had no idea that the word she just said was another word for panties and underwear, holy crap, that would have made things even more insane for me. I'm just so confused. It's like, why go with this word? Why go with this word? How did, like, the people that, like, recorded this, the voice actress saying this, it's like, did none of them realize that this sounds like a certain other word? Did none of them realize that this is, like, you know, there's no way to pronounce this specific word without having it sound like a certain other word? Did they not realize that, man? It's bad enough that Maggie's real name sounds a little bit too close to the F slur, which is why I frequently refer to her as Maggie. But now we have this. We have the gamer word in Hazbin Hotel, kind of. I guarantee you, in Season 3, there's gonna be a character that will say a word that sounds concerningly close to the R slur. It is inevitable. I know that this show is infamous for its excessive swearing, but like, Jesus, I didn't think it would go that far. Oh yeah, speaking of Maggie's real name and how she got it, there's this recurring thing in Season 2 where Maggie tries to change her name, because back when she was an angel in heaven, Adam assigned her with this name because of the woman's equivalent to the PP. So in addition to it unintentionally sounding like the F slur, it's also a very funny and hilarious and mature joke. Y'all would be calling this unfunny and cringe if it was in Family Guy, but it's from Hazbin Hotel, so it's funny. Doesn't make any goddamn sense to me at all. But getting back on topic, the first time that I watched this scene, I just had to keep going back to this one specific line because I couldn't stop laughing at it. This was the first and only time I ever laughed watching Hazbin Hotel. There was now one funny moment in Hazbin Hotel. One funny moment, and it's not even supposed to be funny. It's funny because of how unfortunate it is. I have no idea why they decided to go with this word. I don't know if anyone that worked on this show knew that it sounded a little too close to a certain other infamous word, but alas, they left it in the show, and so as a result of that, we now have the only funny moment in Hazbin Hotel, and again, it's not even intended to be funny.